Let's speak once again to Omar Bara, who's with me in the studio. He's a political analyst and the former director of the Arab American Institute. Good to have you with us again. 32 Palestinians have been killed so far this month alone. Last year, the bloodiest in Israel and the West Bank since 2004. With the most extreme government in Israel's history vowing stricter policies towards Palestinians. To what extent was this uptick in violence that we've seen over the last few days inevitable, and can it be stopped?
It certainly does seem inevitable given the trajectory that we're seeing so far. We've had, as you mentioned, the deadliest year in the West Bank last year. We've also had, that does not even include the bombing of Gaza that killed countless children as well. And Israeli politics are heading in a very, very dark and disturbing direction. You have politicians who are talking about how the Palestinian Nakba, the great catastrophe that happened in 1948, is a job incomplete. And they're talking about potentially the need to escalate violence in a direction where we actually could see a massive campaign of ethnic cleansing hitting the West Bank. It's a very, very disturbing and dark situation right now. And it doesn't seem to be that there's anybody who's putting the reins on this Israeli government to try to deter them from carrying on in this really ugly and violent direction.
You say that, and yet the US Secretary of State is due in the region. Is his presence then not going to make any difference?
Unfortunately, even though I expect some decent statements to come out of Secretary Blinken, the administration has already signaled to Israel pretty strongly that they do not intend to ever hold Israel accountable for anything that Israel does. The trajectory so far is one in which Biden has made clear that U.S. military funding for Israel is never going to be conditioned, in which diplomatic protection. The U.S. has used its veto at the UN Security Council nearly 50 times to shield Israel from accountability at the United Nations. And with a track record like that, there's simply no reason for the Israeli government to take any kind of warnings or calls for calm from the United States as being particularly significant or meaningful, because they know that unrestrained support is going to continue.
All right, so if the US can't be relied upon to bring about some sort of end to the violence, who can? I mean, the UN, the EU?
I mean, look, there's a lot more that these institutions can do.
Right.
And certainly we're talking about things like the International Criminal Court looking into Israel's conduct in the occupied Palestinian territories. There are countless war crimes and crimes against humanity that have been committed by the Israeli government, including the crime against humanity of apartheid. There is now an international human rights consensus. Every major human rights organization in the world agrees that Israel is committing the crime of apartheid. And in light of that, there's no reason why we should not be seeing a repeat of what happened in South Africa. An apartheid government should be boycotted and isolated until that apartheid regime actually falls. Frankly, it's a situation that calls for meaningful sanctions on Israel to say that you can't deliver weapons and military funding to a country that is engaged in this kind of violence. But ultimately, it does fall on the United States as the country that has the most leverage on Israel. The country that funds Israel with $3.8 billion in military funding every single year. That's a policy that absolutely has to change.
Good to talk to you, Omar.